Hi, this is Mom. At Debbie's request, I'm going to attempt to share with you a few anecdotes and childhood remembrances, as well as remembrances as our family together, that you might have something to tell your children on a long winter night or to enjoy as you will. I hope that you can have something that you might enjoy. I notice that my rather strong voice has somewhat deteriorated over the 61 years. Perhaps having the oxygen tube in my nose for so long has helped to weaken the voice. I find the whistle has gone. Just a little wind blowing once in a while as I try to regain that. Maybe I shall. Anyway, when I start my story, I may just as well begin at the beginning. I was born on a Wednesday, March the 30th, 1921, to George C. and Viola H. Matthews at the old St. Mark's Hospital in Salt Lake City. My dad was a clerk with the Telluride Power Company, and my mother was a young farm girl from Grace, Idaho, and she had worked in the bank where my father came and won her and married her. They lived in a little house on First North Street. It's now Second North, but it was a little white house with two pillars just down the hill from Grandmother Matthews' home. On the corner there was a store. It was run by Jack Wheelhouse. I don't know why this name should come back to me after all these years, but it does. And it was one of those little one-room neighborhood groceries. They were so popular in the town. We didn't have supermarkets then as we know them now. It was difficult to get around on the streetcar and this sort of thing. And so they brought the groceries and the foodstuffs out to the neighborhoods. And there one could go in this little compact store and get anything they needed, including meat and green groceries. Anyway, that was just a thought there. What I always remembered about that little store was the door went in from the corner of the building, and Jack used to be standing in the doorway with his white butcher's apron folded halfway up and tucked in so that the blood wouldn't be showing to the neighborhood. And it was fun to go in his store. Oh, I remember the penny candy. Never seen anything to equal that assortment of goodies, and they cost a penny, appropriately. I was born on the 30th day of March on a Wednesday at 1:15 in the morning, and I was born at the old St. Mark's Hospital. I don't remember that, of course. I do remember living in the little white house with the two pillars down at the foot of the hill behind the little store, just down the hill from Grandma Matthews' home. When I was about 2 years old, our family moved to Grace, Idaho, where my father was employed with Utah Power and Light. Well, I guess it was first Telluride Power, but it later was changed to Utah Power and Light. And Dad was a materials man and a clerk there. He worked in the office, and he had a whistle. I loved the whistle, and I love many things about him, of course, but I remember the whistle so well. And we lived there in a little white wooden house painted with a green trim and a green roof, and it was like rows and rows of other neat little homes. And there was a superintendent's house at the top of the hill, and a great big hydroelectric station down below the hill, below the pipes, the largest one west of the Mississippi River at that time. And there were lawns, rolling green lawns, beautifully cared for by little Artie Bannister, our English gardener. We had our own little school a mile away called Telluride School, and we went with some children from the country area there. But we had a marvelous marvelous young life growing up together. They're the camp kids, as they called us. The house was small. We had 2 bedrooms, and of course there were 4 of us. I had another brother, a lovely brother Jack, a stepbrother. He didn't live in our home, but he visited whenever he could. And I had a sister 2 years older than myself, Harriet, and I had 2 brothers, Chase and Chad. Chase was the youngest, and Chase has since passed away. Chad lives now in Boise, and Harriet lives in Hollister, California. Our growing up years were just delightful. We went to the local school, as I've said. My dad used to love to go to the movies in Grace, and on nights when most of the people figured they were well snowed in, we would get out the old Ford and away we'd go, and he'd call ahead and tell Mr. Murray, Mr. Parkhouse, and anyone else who he thought might have bad road out front that we were coming to get the horse ready, and they would pull us through the bad spots, and we'd go to the movies, literally come hell or high water. And we had a good time doing this, and everybody, all the kids in the camp liked to go because we were having such adventures. And Dad and Mother had some delightful friends in Grace. I remember some of their names. They might bore you, but there were some people, especially George Ellis, who ran the drugstore, and Bert Orr, who ran the movies, and there were many of them. Merv Nelson, who was the barber, and there was the grocerman, Peterson, and John Roghar, who ran the dry goods. It's fun to think of their names again. And Johnny Skaggs, who ran they called him Johnny Skaggs. His name was Johnny Greaves, who ran the Skaggs Food Market. And, of course, the men who ran the garages, also their names were. We had a fun time in that little town. I went to high school there, graduated, and had many, many lovely friends. And it was the custom in those days for our dad and mother to go with us to all the school dances. Of course, they went with their own crowd, but we were together at the dances, and the kids enjoyed each other, and the parents also. And we'd stop in at the same little old restaurant, the Yacht Club in Grace. It was the only one there, and have refreshments after the dance. Had such a good time. I was active in student government there, and in dramatics, and pet club, and publishing the school paper. Had a marvelous young growing up time. It used to be a lot of fun to have our cousins come to visit us at Grace, especially those from Salt Lake. And they loved to come up to Idaho. They thought they were really coming to the country, and they enjoyed the openness and the fishing in the river there. And they came often on holidays. I remember one time on the 4th of July, my father had milked the cow, Molly, and of course Molly was adaptable to Dad's hours, and so it was milked early in the morning, 4 o'clock, and Mother had to strain the milk and put it out in big flat pans on the kitchen table to cool before she refrigerated it. Dad was home and just going to bed. It's about 5 a.m. and the relatives came from Salt Lake, all laughing. The cars filled with food and fun, and came in the back door. And it was a warm night, and the doors were always left open. Nothing was ever locked. And lit a package of firecrackers in Mother's kitchen. And it was the 4th of July weekend. And and the little papers, the crackers went off, and the little papers blew all over in the new cream on the milk pans. And I remember how the Matthews family and Grace all came to attention and ran out to greet our cousins and our relatives from Salt Lake. They used to always bring such good things. They'd bring breakfast rolls from Keeley's and candies that were so good, good foods. We'd love to have them come, and it was a party as long as they were there. We did this and enjoyed them a great deal, and then in turn my boy cousins would come to Grace, and the girls would, Harriet and I would go to Salt Lake, and we'd stay in an apartment. At that time they lived at Grandma's house at Aunt Marge's, and then down the hill at the Fairmont Apartments. They used to be on 5th South down by Carlson Chevrolet, and they were big apartments, but that's where Uncle Wes and Aunt Dee and their children lived. And we'd stay in their homes and in Aunt Jo's home also, and have a marvelous time in the city. And our aunties would give us $1 or a quarter even, and we'd go downtown and it would last us all day shopping. And we had such wonderful times, and I remember we always made a visit to the state capitol, a part of our fun, because it was free and it wasn't too far to walk up the hill from Aunt Marge's. And we'd go up the hill and play around the big trees and sit on the big lions at the doorways to the Capitol, and wander through those halls, those beautiful marble halls, and pick out pictures in the marble and look at the exhibits. And they were dusty and old, and there was the big one of the coal and the one of the Massasoit, the Indian, and Ab Jenkins' racing car. They used to all be there in the foyer, and it was such fun to think of those years. And I remember reading a book later on by the girl who's now the general president of the Mutual, and she reminisces about that. They grew up in that neighborhood, but how much time she spent in playing in the Capitol. I don't know who the custodians were, but we must have been quiet. It was a place that led to reverence, to see the big doors with the Senate signs, and how many times we went to look at that beautiful blue room that was the governor's room, and those lovely old buildings. And I didn't suppose that I'd live here at that time, but how much we enjoyed Salt Lake City, and to go visiting in the shops downtown. There was one little place that Mother and I were talking about the other day, and it was called Keeley's, and it was a little confectionery stop. They had a bakery counter with French pastries and the most wonderful breakfast rolls. I've never seen anything like it before or since. And they were thin and just buttery, and the frosting was so good, and the fillings, oh, they were lovely. All their bakery goods were just delicious. And the sandwiches were so good. And Harriet and I used to think it was so neat to have such a dainty, delicate little sandwich with lettuce and this sort of thing. And the drinks, that's where we learned to love carbonated drinks. But the food was always so good in Keeley's. And it was here for years and years on Main Street, and we enjoyed it a lot. And then we would walk on down to Aunt Dee's and stay with her a few days. She was such a lovely cook. She made things so well, and especially do I remember her potato salad. And she still makes it just the same way. It's just lovely. But those were fun days to think about. And one day when we were down here, I remember my little aunties, they were all quite ample-breasted and a little bit towards the heavy side. Very pleasant, and they had such a merry laugh. Each one of them had their own individual laugh. And we all went out to Salt Air. And it was beech nut day that day. And they had big baskets of beech nut gum, single sticks wrapped in paper. I remember the green and the yellow gum, and the two flavors, I guess, spearmint and peppermint. But they'd throw it in the corners of the buildings. You couldn't see them, but my aunties would stand there and hold out their skirt and get a. Oh, we had a basket full of chewing gum, and the fun that we had. And they always took good food. And Aunt Marge had a big red and white pan, and it had campfire marshmallows on it. It was one of the last things I observed there in her little little pantry in the back of her kitchen. Anyway, that was always filled with chips, potato chips, and they were a luxury at home. In fact, I'm not sure that we could even buy them all the time. But she always had that filled with goodies to eat. And lovely homemade things, cookies and this sort of thing. And the food was always good. There was always a little picnic or something to eat along the way. I don't know if you kids know the story about Aunt Marge, that she planted the hollyhocks between here and Bountiful. And every time she'd take a handful of seeds from Grandma's house, and every place she'd come to that looked like it might be a little fertile and get a little natural water, she'd stop and plant a hollyhock. And at one time along the old highway, there were hollyhocks growing everywhere. And they were all due to the fact that she loved to add color to the countryside. And she almost had a patch of hollyhocks between here and Bountiful, where her cousins lived, or Centerville, where we really went a lot. But she raised hollyhocks along the highways, and that's a little anecdote that you can remember about Aunt Marge. And anyway, back to those little aunties. They were fun, and they always had a lot of hair that they wore in a loose braid or a bun or something. That there were red-headed girls at one time. Well, Aunt Marge was darker, but Aunt Ann had beautiful red hair, and Aunt Jo had, hers was a little more like mine, not quite as nice of hair, but they always had their hair fixed. As Aunt Jo, as I recall, now she used to wear kind of a modern bob, but the other two girls had, or ladies had updos, with a bun, and their hair was always so fun, and there was always something sticking out of it. I remember when Aunt Marge came up to grace Chad's wedding, there she was with the same hairdo and a couple of nasturtiums in her hair. Real nasturtiums from her garden. But she'd tuck any kind of a flower in there and wear it. But we had lovely times visiting here in Salt Lake. Enjoyed those years so much. And just simple pleasures, but it was fun to go with them in a car and have a nice ride. And they always took us. Uncle Harv would take us up to Federal Heights, and we'd all go in out those homes, and they're very much the same as they are today. A lot of them were, but they were just mansions in those days, and lovely, lovely homes. And he knew where to go for all the fun spots for the bride, and we enjoyed that a great deal. later on, Aunt Dee and Uncle Wes moved out to 27th South, not too far from where we are. And they had a little home right along 27th, which was about the last populated street. And they had chickens out back. They had big coops of chickens, and they kept the eggs and handled the chickens. And it was fun to go to their house there. It was almost like they lived in the country. Her Aunt Dee did this, and Uncle Wes, of course, was a salesman for Carlson Cadillac. He was a car salesman for a lot of his lifetime. He was a master salesman, really. And it was fun to visit them there at that home. The kids were a little older then, and we were getting to be teenagers. It wasn't long before we'd all gone our separate ways. But there was a period there in our lifetime when we shared so much time together as cousins, because that satisfied Father always as his vacation to come and visit his family in Utah. And then he always was happy to get back to Grace. And of course he died and was buried up there. But, well, he wasn't. But anyway, he had a funeral in Grace, I remember, and was buried here in Salt Lake. But he didn't ever want to leave Grace. He passed up many opportunities for advancement in that because of his friends there. Anyway, the years passed by, and high school came and went. We had all the fun that goes with that. I've mentioned a few things about it. And one day I decided, boy, you finish high school. And my father used to buy our evening gowns, as we called them. But we had a spring dance in high school that called a furlong dancing dress. And Dad would get them. He'd come to Salt Lake more frequently than the rest of us sometimes, or he'd send for them. And he bought us some very lovely dresses. I remember our graduation dresses were alike. Really? Our graduation? Anyway, Harriet's was blue and mine was green. And they were crepe, and they had a plaid organdy or organza sleeve and a collar. And those were cute dresses. And then the day that he brought the taffeta, and it was rainbow taffeta. Beautiful colors. One was plum colored, and one was peacock blue. And I don't remember which girl got which, but they were in the changeable taffeta. Oh, did we ever feel swishy? And then, of course, we graduated in the same graduating class. And so we had two more dresses then. And it was fun, but it was kind of unusual. I thought that he should be the one that shopped for the long dresses. And that was fun. But anyway, it came time to go away to college, and I of course decided on Ricks, and you know the story. You've all heard the story of how Dad and I met. And Dad he had a scholarship to BYU, as did I. And we both chose his coach, his local coach there, said he should play at home. And so he played ball at home and went to Ricks. And I chose Ricks because of its size. And of course it was closer too than, it was in the same state that I was. And it was closer than coming down here to the Y. So we met at Ricks, and we had a good time. I took stenographic training, and he was in athletics. I don't know what else. He started in agronomy, but he didn't really decide on anything particularly. He got all his basics and then finished in business at the U after the war. But we had a fun time at Ricks College. I didn't like the weather up there. I thought it was terrible. But it was a fun town to go away to school too, and we just thoroughly enjoyed it. The college was much smaller, only 2 buildings then, and it didn't grow until after the war. But up until the time that my father said, you have a job with the United States government, he had promised that I could go to Washington and work in D. Worth Clark's office. And I nearly made it, but then they thought that was so far away, and so Dad got a job for me in Pocatello. The only requirement was that I show up in May instead of June, and so I left school early a month and went to work down in Pocatello in the federal government office. And I lived in the hotel. He had a friend who was the manager of the Bannock Hotel, and I lived alone there in the little room right downtown, and walked half a block over above the People's Store to the funny little office, government office, and had the civil service job when I was 18. I didn't ever go home from there. I worked from then on and was married, of course, and I didn't go home to live, I should say. But I enjoyed those years. I enjoyed also the years that I spent with Grandma Harris. And that was many summers that I spent down on the farm because she was alone and Harriet wouldn't stay down there. She was frightened. So it became my lot to take her turn and mine both. And it was quite an experience. It was very lonely a lot of the time because when the sun went down, Grandma went to bed. And it was there that I learned to read the Relief Society magazines. That's the only magazine she had in her home was the Relief Society magazine and the Idaho Farmer. And it wasn't a very big choice. And the magazine didn't have the content that it does now. But it was fun. There was always one story in them, at least, and some of the lessons which I didn't read. But I enjoyed those old magazines. And I used to paint her house and cook food for my Uncle Glenn. And I did a lot of work for Grandma, and her little home was a tiny little house. It was just like a playing house, actually. And so I was involved in her home for quite a while. And then, of course, our marriage. From then on, you kids sort of know what went on in our lives. We came along and returned Ann up at the Harborview Hospital in Seattle, and she was our little war baby. And when school was out, we got back in. We were in Salt Lake. I was working again. I worked this time for Union Pacific Railroad, and along came Polly, and then Debbie, of course. Let's see, Debbie was born, I guess, in Blackfoot. Well, we lived up in Blackfoot, but it was Polly who was born here in her little house. We brought her home to Mount Air Acres. I told this story before about when we moved out of that beautiful home. It cost $9,000. And Austin and I looked at my dad and mother loaned us some money for the down payment. And we looked at each other and we thought, will we ever in our lifetime be able to pay off that mortgage? Isn't that strange? $9,000. And those little homes are still in there. It's right down across from the Villa Theater. And anyway, when that little home was finished, it was so fun to decorate. And of course, a lot of those things came with the cost of your home. So I chose the paper, and I chose a stripe with the off-white and a burgundy. And then I had white curtains, and people came from all around to look at my dining room and my and the furnishings in that little house. And they were the most humble furnishings from the cheapest department in the store, but the color was fun, and there was a lot of color in that house. Anyway, we just got it all decorated, and the lawns in, and thought, well, here we go, finally sailing along. And Dad was with J.C. Penney's and downtown store. Quite enjoyed it. He graduated from the U in retailing and merchandising and business administration. And he was the excuse me, the first grandson on the Garner side to finish college. And he we were doing nicely. not any money, but very nicely. And then along came the transfer to Idaho. And then things moved from one town to another. First we went to Blackfoot, and it was there that Debbie was born. And then and that's where we were when Grandma Harris died. She'd been living with us, and as had Mother. My father died while we were there. And we had Grandma and Great-Grandma both living in our home. And Harriet took them when I became pregnant. It was there that Polly fell in the ditch. And bless her heart, it was not her time to leave this world, because otherwise she may have done. But that was a scary experience. One of many of life's experiences that cause you to sit up and take notice. But it had a happy ending, and she survived that experience. And we had a lovely time. We met such nice people. Had a dinner group in Blackfoot, Dr. Goetz and the Packers, Dr. Packer and his wife, and the friends and neighbors there that will be lifelong friends. We don't keep in touch like we ought to, but we shall never forget them. And we can walk into their homes just like we'd been there a week ago, pick up our conversation and our friendship just like always. And then of course we went to Burley and had the same kind of thing, but as Dad moved along, where was Blackfoot? Oh, Blackfoot's in there somewhere. Oh yeah, that was Blackfoot. And then from Blackfoot to Burley. And the same thing there, another nice group of friends and people in the ward, a dinner club, and same type of friends, good people. And then, of course, we had some fun experiences in Burley also. There was one while we lived in that little house in Burley. It had a furnace that burned coal. It was rather an old house on Bush Avenue. And we went to Salt Lake, Dad and I, and led the children, and came home early one morning. They were getting ready for school, all sitting there in tears, and the furnace had exploded during the night, and blown black coal dust everywhere. Oh, and there were our little girls trying to get ready, and they looked like little pickaninnies, or little black children with big white eyes full of tears. Anne was wondering how in the world she was going to get them presentable to go to school. She and Debbie and I'm not sure Debbie was old enough. Anyway, she and Polly. And we got home that early that morning. I remember cleaning them up and laughing at those kids, and then that terrible mess of cleaning up all that coal dust. But we had a lot of fun experiences there also. And I was president of the primary while we lived in Burley. And then I decided I wanted to see Baikal, the missile plant came, and I thought, oh, I want to see what's going on down there, and maybe all you could do is to get a job. And a friend of mine and I went down to Brigham City one day, drove down, and just for the fun of it, we applied for the position, a secretarial position, and they called me, and they didn't, she didn't get on, but I got on. And so it was a dumb thing to do, but I drove 60 miles a day, one way, each 120 miles, to and from work, out to that missile plant. I only did it for a few months, but I found out I was pregnant again with Nan. And it was while we were there that Daddy decided that he'd better get away from things, that they were kind of sinking through the cracks in the floor and going into larger stores. He felt rather depressed about these little towns. And so he came down to Salt Lake and got his job at the Grand Central. Goodness. And came back and told me, and I quit my job at Baikal, and we came down looking for a home. And of course found the one on Christmas Street, the little house over on Glen Arbor. And that was the marvelous move. Seems like the Lord has just directed us when it comes to neighborhoods and friends and homes. And many of them have been so humble, but the people that go along with them are so worthwhile. Anyway, I found out, I knew by then I was pregnant with Nan. And I was older. I was 39 years old. And it was a surprise to all of us. We thought, well, look at that, a special blessing. And she has been that. And she's been a real challenging and a blessing. And she's just doing fine. And so we left up there, and after finding out that I had worked there just long enough to fall under the requirements of their health insurance, so that little baby would be paid for by Baikal, and everything was. It's kind of startling the way things turn out. I really had no idea that I did qualify to have that little baby all paid for by them, and so that the drive back and forth there for those 3 months certainly did pay off. And especially, I finally got the clearance for the well, it's the hardest one to get, for security clearance for files and this sort of thing, and it came through just about the time I retired. But anyway, we moved to Grand River, and now the kids, I think, are old enough to remember their lives with us from then on. But it was there that we met the Glen Arbor bunch, with a lovely group of friends that we've enjoyed over all those years, 22 years. And it has been most enjoyable. Marge and Dick were such good friends and neighbors, and Kirk's, and all the good friends and lovely people that were on that street that were in our group, and still are. Still fast and true friends. When they brought the wheelchair for me not long ago, and they said, we've decided that we're now at the geriatric stage in life, we're going to buy a wheelchair, and you're the first one that gets to use it. And by God. So now I have a little chariot, and they come and like to push me about in it. And Pearl and Marge and Kay and all those lovely girls that look out for my welfare. And indeed they are fine, fast friends, and we enjoy them, as do we enjoy our family. You know, I have this little piece that, speaking of the family group, and what a blessing it is. It's written by our bishop last June. It says, we rejoice together, we cry together, we offer strength, we give support, we give, we receive, we teach and we learn. And now this little verse. I met a stranger in the night whose lamp had ceased to shine. I paused and let him light his lamp for mine. A tempest sprang up later on and blew the world about, and when the wind was gone, my light was up. Then back again the stranger came. His light was growing fine. He held again that precious flame and lighted mine. And I feel that way about my family. We do light each other's lamps. We support each other. We have good times together. I've just been looking at some pictures that were taken on the 24th of July out at Ken and Debbie's when we were all together. Every one of us are in that picture. And it's quite a rare family picture. With all the beautiful little grandchildren and the fun sons and daughters. And also I found the funny picture of my four gorgeous daughters pulling their faces up at the picnic in the canyon. And these are fun memories. There's some pictures from that group we got back the other day that are quite old, and it's almost like opening an album when we get together. But it's fun to have such a marvelous resource as a family, and I'm grateful for this. I don't know how long Debbie wants me to take on this tape, but I'm doing it at her request, and it hasn't run down apparently, so I would like to bear my testimony. First, I'd like to thank my dear Father in heaven for my good husband and my children. Austin has always been a support to me, and through thick and through thin, we've enjoyed each other. I hope he has me, because I certainly have him, and he has a sincerity and a tenderness in his heart that I love and appreciate. I always thought the world of his dad and mother too, and I have heard people who were a little bit short of patience with them sometimes, but they've never been anything but just lovely to me, and I've enjoyed knowing them both and being part of the family. And of course they're both gone now, but very many pleasant memories associated with them, and I'm grateful for having known Blaine called tonight and said, it doesn't sound as soft as the front side of the cassette did in a few places. I'm sorry. It's 2:30 in the morning, and I laid down while I was taping a little bit of that, and it's hard to hear. I should have stayed sitting up. But the middle of the night seems the best time to record. I do want to go on, but I want the tape to be legible or understandable, so that it would be worth keeping. And I don't know how to correct it well enough to go back and do that, or I should do it maybe. Except then I'll leave half of it out. Anyway, that's enough of that. Blaine called, as I said, today, and they're on their way to Arizona for the winter. They're going down to live in their trailer in Mesa. I think that would be really confining. I'd not rather be in my home, but I wish the sun would shine around us a little more frequently and the temperatures would stay up. It gets cold in Salt Lake now, and it didn't ever used to bother me. But as one gets a little bit thinner and a little bit older, I guess the cold creeps in. Well, kids, I started to bear my testimony, and I'd like to finish that and tell you how grateful I am for the care that Mother's been to me and given to me over these past months. And I think our roles have reversed somewhat, or at least she's taken over as a mother-child again. I feel very, very humble and very inadequate, not being able to carry on my load like I should. I feel sorry about that with Dad too. He's so young and so vigorous, and I know he loves to go out, and I try to, but sometimes the spirit's willing and the flesh is a little weak. Anyway, we'll do the best we can, and I hope that it's all right. I wrote a little card to Isaac tonight. Bless his little heart. I remember going back for his birth, and what a little tiny thing he was, coming home in that little green suit. Bright green it was. He looked like a little elf, and seemed like Polly'd only been in the hospital for a few hours, but he was such a dear little baby. And here it is, his birthday again. He's in school, or he's in kindergarten. And I've been thinking about him. I thought what fun he'd have running and playing in all these yellow leaves that have fallen the last 2 days. Salt Lake, the day we drove up to the doctor's office on Thursday, I guess. Excuse me. We drove up to the doctor's on Thursday, and the trees were just yellow and beautiful. And now I guess they've all fallen in the gutters, and the rainstorm has plugged them up, and they've had all kinds of disasters downtown. But I'm sorry about that. I don't like flooding in people's homes. But weather's kind of unpredictable around here. But anyway, I'm grateful for so many things, for the children and for my good husband, and my membership in the church, my lovely sisters here in the ward who've been so kind and gracious to bring us in delicious food and to stick by me over all these months, a year that I've been incapacitated, and to be as faithful and as loyal as they've been. And I certainly do appreciate all of them. Dad went tonight down to the New Deseret Industries with the group, the presidency of the high priest, and they all came home with a new blue sport coat. They bought them for $2, and they're all alike. And they thought, well, we're gonna wear these somewhere together tonight.
I'm gonna record over what Fan's been saying on this old tape to see how we do when we erase, if we just go right over the old tape and how it comes out. And she wants to start on a new tape, so we'll know better how to erase this one when we want to do over it. See how, I don't know how else we erase the old tape.
And it's supposed to be kind of a show place for the church, for tourists, and people are quite impressed with the way things are done there. But anyway, election draws close by again, and I'll be happy and elated, as a matter of fact, when it's over. Such a waste of time and money. We need candidates rather than so much rhetoric that it's not very meaningful. But anyway, they're certainly spending the money, and the president's supposed to be here on Friday again. He's giving us an hour of his time in Salt Lake. But whatever. I'm just kind of discouraged with a lot of them, but I'm hopeful too that something will come along that we'll all be able to adjust to. And that now I'm going to just add to this from time to time, and I hope it isn't too noisy as I turn it off and on frequently. I know that doesn't make for a very good tape, but I do have some thoughts and things that come along, and I'm not just sure what Debbie wants this for, but excuse me, I've got to stop yawning or recording or both. But I've got to be sure that it's something that she can, along the lines that she wanted to use. But anyway, it's fun to do this for you, and we'll add to it from time to time. Good night.
You push both play and record down together, and then you just start out and talk into it with this pushed up to on. And you should be putting it on the tape.